Hi everyone, and welcome to English Digest. I'm Pat.
And I'm Erin.
So, after I'd lived in Taiwan for a little while, I started to feel that Taiwan was kind of more LGBT friendly.
Yes, it is.
Than felt like other Asian countries. I hadn't been to many, but I just got that feeling.
Right. I've been to Korea.
I've been to Japan.
I know it's more LGBT. I think we say Q now at the end.
Okay.
LGBTQ friendly.
Right.
Than Korea. But yeah, I've just noticed that, like for me, I have a lot of lesbian or gay friends.
Same.
And they've never had to feel like they need to hide their orientation. So
why do you think that is? What do you think it is about Taiwan that has that I've asked students about it several times.
I've never really thought about it. I guess people are friendlier here, and they've had a democratic society for a few years.
A few people pointed out that, just kind of having freedom since the end of, the 1980s. It kind of meant that, all right, then everything should get freedom.
Right.
Sort of idea. Now, the reason why I brought that up is because our News Digest article today takes a look at something that Taiwan did a few months ago when, as the title says, took a big step towards same-sex marriage becoming legal, becoming a recognized thing that people are allowed to do. So let's read through the article and find out more about what happened. Taiwan's Council of Grand Justices made a landmark ruling in May 2017 when it found laws preventing same-sex marriage to be unconstitutional. The Grand Justices gave Taiwan's legislature 2 years to amend the laws that stop same-sex couples from registering their marriages or create new laws permitting them to register. If this time elapses, same-sex couples will be able to legally register their marriages. It is still unclear what the legislature will do. Advocates of same-sex marriage hope that the existing laws will be updated to include same-sex couples. This would grant them all the same rights as other married couples regarding matters such as property, adoption, medical consent, and more. The government may also choose to create entirely separate laws, though same-sex marriage supporters are concerned that these might not give them equal treatment on such issues. Since the Netherlands became the first country to allow same-sex marriages in 2001, a number of other countries have followed suit. However, Taiwan is notable for being the first Asian country to make an official ruling that will end in legalization. In some other Asian nations, same-sex marriages are simply not recognized, while in others, homosexuality is a criminal offense. Gay rights activists throughout Asia have been fighting for equality in their own countries for many years. Taiwan's step towards recognition is being hailed as a victory, though activists know that there is still a long way to go. While I think it is still a long way to the equality dominoes falling all over Asia, I think a few East Asian countries, such as Japan and Vietnam, may be more ready to consider equality legislation, said Raymond Chan, Hong Kong's first openly gay lawmaker.
All right, so we're talking about the steps that Taiwan has taken towards gay or same-sex marriage legalization. So if we take a look at the title, it says Taiwan takes a big step towards same-sex marriage. And we'll get right into the first sentence here. It says Taiwan's Council of Grand Justices made a landmark ruling in May 2017 when it found laws preventing same-sex marriage to be unconstitutional. All right, so let's talk first about the Council of Grand Justices.
It's a fancy name, isn't it?
I did like it. I had to look it up.
Me too.
Yep. And I found out that it's the branch of government that's charged with interpreting Taiwan's constitution.
Yes.
Okay, so that's a lot to handle there. I did find out that it also supervises the lower courts, including the Supreme Court and the appeals courts and stuff like that.
I guess it's kind of similar to the Supreme Court in the US.
Well,
in a way, in that it interprets the Constitution.
Yes, yeah. That's what I thought it was at first, was the Supreme Court. But then I read that
these systems are slightly different,
right.
aren't they? Like the UK also has a sort of Supreme Court, but in the UK, they can't overrule Parliament.
Okay.
Parliament is like number one, so the Supreme Court can't shut them up or change their rules or anything like that. So, yeah. And I also found out there are 15 of these judges.
15 of them. And
15 Grand Justices.
I feel like that's a great title to have. Yeah. I'm a Grand Justice.
Yes. So, what did these guys do? Well, they made a landmark ruling. I'm going to look at the word ruling first because that's kind of the main noun, and then we describe it or modify it with landmark. A ruling is basically a decision on a law or a rule. They've kind of come to an agreement and says, this is our official position in our official capacity as Grand Justices.
Yes.
This is the rule we've made and the decision we've come to, and that will affect a number of other things.
Right. It's usually made by the courts, which is what makes it official.
Okay, and it's a landmark ruling. Normally we use landmark as a noun, and it can mean an important or significant stage in something, like an event or a discovery, something or other is a landmark. But as we've seen in the article, we can use it as kind of like an adjective to modify other things. So a landmark ruling is an important, significant ruling that kind of marks an important step or stage in something's development or, moving forward and kind of almost history-making change.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to describe it, is that it's history-making.
Yes.
All right, so these Grand Justices made this landmark ruling, and the ruling was that they found that Taiwan's laws preventing same-sex marriage were unconstitutional. Now, unconstitutional means that it's not correct according to the Constitution. So the Constitution is basically a set of rules or principles by which a government says they're going to run the government of a country. So we all know, well, you probably know about the U.S. Constitution and how
it's one of the more famous ones.
It's got a lot of laws which say you're free to do this, you're free to do this. There's always arguments about it in the news. And Taiwan also has a constitution which governs how we live in Taiwan. And so the Grand Justices decided that preventing same-sex marriage was unconstitutional, which means that it should be allowed by the Constitution.
So the laws kind of they're saying, well, the law says they can't, but our Constitution guarantees freedom for all people to marry. So saying that these people can marry and these people can't marry, that's not what the Constitution was meant to say. The Constitution guarantees freedoms, but the laws are preventing them, so these laws do not follow the Constitution. We need to do something about the laws. Okay, and after this, the Grand Justices gave Taiwan's legislature 2 years, and they kind of gave them a choice. They said, okay, A, you can amend the laws, okay, we'll get to what that means, that stops same-sex couples from registering their marriage, or B, create new laws permitting them, same-sex couples, to register. So the legislature, this is the governing body of Taiwan. This is the lawmakers, basically.
The group of lawmakers.
The group of lawmakers from all parties who get together and discuss the laws and have to take votes and come to agreements. It's not quite the same as the president and her group of advisors. They are the executive branch. The legislature is the lawmaking branch.
Okay. And so we saw that in option A here, that they could either amend the laws that stop same-sex couples from registering their marriage. So when you amend something, you correct or you make changes to something, usually to make it better, to improve it in some way. So,
yes, to make make it more accurate,
Right.
more clear sometimes, or just to kind of bring it in line with recent information or developments. So the law may have worked once, but the world has changed, so the law has to be changed, amended.
Right. So what they're thinking about doing here is taking the laws that are already in the Constitution and changing it so that same-sex couples can register their marriage. Now, register is when you put your name on an official list or you sign an official document with the government to say that you are married or you've had a child or something to that effect.
Yeah, it's like when you register for classes at your college or something, you would go and sign up and officially say, yes, I will take this course. Here it's signing a document and kind of paying a fee in some cases that says, yes, we are officially, legally married by law and we can be treated as such.
Right.
Okay, so that's option one.
Right.
Just kind of tweak or change, amend the laws to say, okay, now everybody can go and marry, whether you're man, woman, man. It's all the same as far as the laws are. Option B would be to create new laws. So instead of just amending them, they just add an extra law that says basically same-sex couples can do this too.
Right.
Now, this has knock-on effects, which we kind of discuss in the second paragraph. First, we will just add that if this time, the 2 years elapses, same-sex couples will be able to legally register their marriage.
Okay.
The word elapse is a verb. It's used to describe pretty much time or periods of time that pass, that go by. And so what the justice's ruling is saying is if this 2 years elapses, if this 2 years ends, then the laws automatically include same-sex marriages.
Okay.
So they're basically giving a deadline and saying if you don't change anything or add new laws by the end of 2 years, then everybody has to treat the law as including same-sex marriages no matter what you do.
Okay, well, let's get into the second paragraph here. It says, it is still unclear what the legislature will do. So there hasn't been any news yet about what will happen with this. We're still waiting to see if they will A, amend the laws, or B, create new laws.
Ones. Yeah,
right.
I mean, 2 years it seems like a long time, but in terms of making laws, it's not.
It's not.
These things take a while.
Right. It's quite a short time in terms of legislation. So it'll take some time yet before we find out what is going to happen and how soon it will take place.
If I was being a little bit cynical, I would say the timing of it will have to do when there's a next major vote.
Interesting.
Yes, that's a topic I might discuss later.
Right.
At the moment, we will say advocates of same-sex marriage hope that the existing laws will be updated to include same-sex couples. So that is basically they want option A,
Right.
which we described earlier. Now, an advocate is a person who publicly supports a cause. They kind of speak about it. They show their support for it. You know, they're not going to hide what they believe in. They say, yes, I'm in favor of this particular thing. And so that doesn't just mean people who are gay and lesbian and so on. It means people who support them and believe they should have the same freedoms. So anybody who supports this idea is an advocate as long as they do it publicly.
Right.
And they hope that the laws will be updated, which is similar to saying amended, changed, and those other words we discussed.
Right.
So.
It's another way of saying to make it more modern.
Exactly. Yes. You can update your computer, for example, to make it more modern and work better.
Right.
And that's what they want with these laws. Now, why do they want this?
Well, this would grant them all the same rights as other married couples regarding matters such as property, adoption, medical consent, and more. Now, this goes into what you were saying a little bit earlier about the knockdown effect. So when you amend the laws to include same-sex couples, it's going to grant them all the same rights as other married couples. Now, when you grant someone something, you give them something or allow them to have something that they have asked for, and it's usually used in a formal or official way instead of just give, which is daily speech. We would say the government is granting you this, so the government grants you or the government gives you the same rights.
Yeah, and these rights include things to do with property. Property is houses or buildings or land that is owned. And of course, in a marriage, if, the husband dies, then the wife would usually then become the owner of the house, things like that. Children would then inherit and so on.
Right.
And at the moment, if a same-sex couple is kind of unofficially married, there are no rules to protect them in this case.
So if one of the partners died, they would lose the house completely.
Exactly. Okay, so then by granting the same rights, that means they get the rights on property so that houses and land doesn't just kind of disappear if one of the couple dies or something like that. Another one is adoption.
Right. So adoption is the act or process of adopting a child. And it's not an easy process for anybody, but right now it's not legal for same-sex marriages or same-sex partners to adopt children or to take children into their home and raise them. Amending the laws would give same-sex couples the right to adopt children and raise the children as their own. Right now, if a same-sex couple has children, if one of the parents dies, then the other partner is not...
Will they lose the child?
Yeah,
it will be kind of taken away
lose the
and
child.
Placed in a home. Okay, so again, we want them to have the same rights as regular traditional couples.
Right.
A third one that's mentioned is medical consent. Okay, so for example, if a husband is in an accident, then the wife then is allowed some power to decide what kind of treatment the husband gets. If the husband is in a great deal of pain due to cancer, the wife can decide the kind of treatment that they get. Right now, same-sex couples don't have that. They can't decide, so the family of the sick or terminally ill person would get involved. And I believe that has happened in the last sort of few years in Taiwan, and that's led to some very unhappy feelings, bitter feelings. So again, it's just all of these things, property, adoption, medical consent, and more. It's all about giving same-sex couples treat them exactly the same. Same rights, same abilities, and all of that sort of thing.
Exactly.
We'll move on to talk about this a little more in a moment. Right now, we're going to take a short break. Okay, welcome back. So we've just kind of discussed option A, as it were, amending the laws so that same-sex couples get the same rights. Now, we also mentioned option B or option 2, which would be to create new laws.
Right. So the article says the government may also choose to create entirely separate laws. We talked about that earlier. Though same-sex marriage supporters or these advocates are concerned that these might not give them equal treatment on such issues. Now, an issue is a problem or a thing in society that needs to be discussed. Often people are on both sides and they have problems with each other because they can't decide on what is right or what is wrong. And it's something that's discussed a lot in society. So you'll see same-sex marriage is an issue in society and things like this. Now, what this is saying is that if the government creates entirely new laws, the language that they use to make these laws might not give same-sex couples the exact same rights that we talked about before, which...
property, adoption, medical stuff,
so
etc.
While it may allow them to marry, it may not come with the full benefits that heterosexual or different sex couples receive.
Yeah, which is obviously not as good, so hopefully it doesn't go that way.
That's true.
So now we start to talk about sort of the same-sex couple rights around the world. Since the Netherlands became the first country to allow same-sex marriages in 2001, a number of other countries have followed suit.
Okay.
To follow suit means to basically do the same thing as somebody else has already done. It comes from card playing.
Okay.
Because there are 4 suits in a deck of cards, hearts, spades, diamonds, clubs. And in a lot of games, if the first player lays a particular card, then the other players have to lay the same card.
Right.
So he plays a diamond, you have to play a diamond or you can't win that game.
Interesting.
Kind of thing. So that's where the phrase comes from. It's a card sort of phrase, but it just means just do the same thing as somebody else has already done.
Okay, so we saw that the Netherlands was the first country to allow same-sex marriages. And in our news articles over the past few years, we've talked about other countries that have done the same thing.
Yep, Ireland was one who did it by referendum.
Exactly.
So the people voted. It wasn't just the lawmakers.
Okay, so it here says, however, Taiwan is notable for being the first Asian country to make an official ruling that will end in legalization. Okay, so Taiwan may not be the first country to make these steps, but it is the first, it's notable for being the first Asian country to do something. Now, notable means that something is important or interesting in some way that makes it easily noticed. So being the first country to do something makes you easily noticed in the news world, and Taiwan is easily noticed for being the first Asian country to do this. Now, what they've done is make an official ruling that will end in legalization. That means eventually this is going to become legal. Then that's what legalization is. It's the act of making something legal.
Now, we also see that in some other Asian nations, same-sex marriages are simply not recognized. That means, although in some countries ceremonies can be performed, I believe Vietnam people can actually go through a service,
right?
But it's not recognized by the government. Okay, the government doesn't acknowledge the existence or the legality. It says basically, okay, you say you're married, fair enough, but in terms of laws, it's not legal. In terms of all that other stuff about property, it's not legal. They just don't recognize it.
Okay.
So...
well, that's a step, but it's not quite there.
It's not quite there. Now, unfortunately, while in others, meaning other Asian countries, homosexuality, that means relations between two people of the same sex, is a criminal offense. It's actually against the law. An offense is anything that makes people unhappy or upset or hurt, but a criminal offense specifically means something that breaks the law.
Right.
It's just the same as
crime.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so... here we see that gay rights activists throughout Asia have been fighting for equality in their own countries for many years. So an activist is someone who works hard to change something, usually in a political way, sometimes in a social way. They're doing things to make change. So maybe they're leading protests or they are founding organizations that work towards making change.
Yes, slightly different from the word advocate we looked at earlier. An advocate is a public supporter, but maybe, I'm sure they do act and give and help out, but the activists are the ones who are really leading the activities.
Right. Okay, so they've been fighting for this equality in their own countries for many years. So not just Taiwan, but all around Asia, in China, in Japan, in Korea. All right, so they've been fighting for equality, which is a situation in which people have the exact same rights as each other. And so we saw earlier that same-sex couples do not have the same rights as other married couples. And so if you're making it equal and giving everybody the same rights, or you're trying to get equality for everyone.
Okay. Now, of course, Taiwan kind of making this ruling back in May, that was great news for all of these activists.
Right.
So we say Taiwan's step toward recognition or recognizing same-sex marriages is being hailed as a victory, though activists know there is still a long way to go. If you hail something, you publicly praise that thing and you basically say, this is great. Thank you, Taiwan, for kind of leading the way here. Let's use this as an example to inspire and motivate ourselves to do the same thing and keep fighting and know that we can kind of get there in the end. Although, as some say, that there is still a long way to go. It's not going to just change overnight. No,
and we see that basically when it comes to making legislation. It's very difficult and it takes a really long time. All right, so we end the article with a quote here. And it's from Raymond Chan, Hong Kong's first openly gay lawmaker. We'll get to that in a minute, but let's just read through this quote and find out what he says. He says, "While I think it is still a long way to the equality dominoes falling all over Asia, I think a few East Asian countries, such as Japan and Vietnam, may be more ready to consider equality legislation." Now let's look at this phrase here that he's used, a long way to the equality dominoes falling. Now, a domino is a piece from a game from the same name, Dominoes. It's a small black rectangular shape.
Yeah, about the same size as a mahjong piece.
Right. And on each side, it's kind of separated into two sides. You can see little white dots that look like the dots from a dice.
Yes.
Just a different color. So it's white dots on a black domino. And what you do is you can play a game with them, but there's also another fun thing you can do with dominoes. You can line them up in a row, and like if you see videos of these online, you'll see very elaborate lines of dominoes.
Yes.
And as soon as you push one domino, all the rest of the dominoes in the line fall down. And so that's what we're saying here, is it's a long way to the equality dominoes falling all over Asia. So as soon as Taiwan does something, maybe another country will do something, and another one, and another one, and another one.
Well, if they're doing it, then maybe we can do it, kind of thing.
So we're still a long way from that happening.
Yes. I mean, an example, a comparison, we saw the Netherlands went in 2001.
Right.
But it's now been 15, 16 years since then, and there's still only around 20 to 30 countries worldwide who have this kind of legislation.
So it's going to take a while for this to happen. And, you know, maybe in a few years, it'll start happening a bit more quickly. Things tend to happen more quickly as soon as lots of other people start doing it. So you never know. It may kind of come about in the next couple of decades or so. But it may happen with a few Asian countries. Here he's saying that Japan and Vietnam may be more ready to consider this kind of legislation, which is a law or a set of laws that could be made towards legalizing gay marriage or same-sex marriage.
Yeah, exactly. Legislation could also mean slightly amending the laws in the same way we talked about earlier, but basically it's some kind of government legal change. You know, bring in a new law, change a new law, get rid of an old law, something that's debated, discussed, and made official, signed by the president or the prime minister or whoever. Legislation is the making of laws.
Right.
And Raymond Chan, the guy whose quote we just read, he is a lawmaker. We could also say legislator, which is related to the word legislature we looked at earlier, the whole group of lawmakers. So a lawmaker is someone who is in the legislature, in the government, and works to make laws.
Right.
And he's openly gay, which means he says, yes, I'm gay, I'm homosexual, and I'm not going to hide it.
Right.
And I'm going to fight for these things, that kind of thing.
Right. It's interesting that not many countries in Asia have openly gay lawmakers.
No.
They may have gay lawmakers,
True.
but they are not openly gay because it hasn't been as open here as it has in some other countries. Now, it will be interesting to see if these laws come through, whether that will change, whether gay lawmakers will come forward and say, yes, I am gay and I'm proud to be gay.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that is basically the news. There are endless more topics to discuss relating to all of this news and law changes. We just don't have time to cover all the different points related to it. So we're going to have to end our lesson here. Thank you very much for listening, everyone. For English Digest, I'm Pat.
And I'm Erin.
Talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.